now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Peachtree dish.
No.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Around the nation, great show today. Of course, we're going to continue to talk about the Uvalde, especially when it comes to the police. We are also going to talk about a segment from Laura Ingraham. You're going to love that. The arguments that they're using, the things that they're desperately pulling out to try to derail the conversation, to throw out the squirrels, to distract everybody from, of course, the need for some common sense gun regulation is just absolutely amazing. They're bringing out the hits. They're trotting out the marijuana argument. So good. I'm going to dismantle that argument, of course. We have Joe Rogan calling himself a liberal. And, of course, we're going to look into... I know, it's crazy. And then we're going to look into more police lies when it came to Uvalde, including the officer in charge that had given the order to not go into the building, into the school to save the children, basically running from reporters. Wow. So lots of fun stuff, lots of very serious stuff, of course. So stay tuned for the next hours. We go around the nation into these stories. Now, before we do, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Obviously helps us out greatly. So, all right. With that, oh, by the way, there is something that there's some breaking news or something like that. Some person named Derp, Jenny Derp, and Amber something. I don't know. I don't pay attention to celebrities. But no, look, we know, of course, that that verdict came in. I have not been paying attention to it because I don't think it's any of my business. The defamation trial, I don't actually really care all that much, and so I've tried to distance myself. But apparently, both, I guess, had defamed each other in a way. I don't know. Again, don't really care. Let's move on. Celebrity gossip. I can't stand it. Can't stand it. All right. So let's dive into the first story. It appears that the Uvalde Police Department and the Uvalde Independent School District police forces are no longer cooperating with the Texas Department of Public Safety's investigation into the massacre at Robb Elementary School and the state's review of law enforcement response. This is according to multiple law enforcement sources telling ABC News. So they're not cooperating into the investigation. According to sources, the decision to stop cooperating occurred soon after the director of DPS, Colonel Stephen McCraw, held a news conference on Friday, during which he said delayed police entry into the classroom was the wrong decision, contrary to protocol. Reached by ABC News, the spokesperson for the Texas Department of Public Safety said, the Uvalde Police Department and Uvalde CSID police have been cooperating with investigators. The chief of the Uvalde CSID police provided an initial interview, but has not responded to a request for a follow-up with the Texas Rangers that was made 2 days ago. So now, wait a minute. We have conflicting reports, which again is not surprising given how the entire response here was filled with conflicting reports. Again, you had initial reports from the police that turned out to be wrong. And so now you also have an issue where we don't know if they're actually cooperating. We have no idea. Are they cooperating or not? I wish they would send a clear message. But this entire situation, again, including, not just the probe, but their response to their response, it just shows that they have absolutely no message at all. And look, I know why, at least I can think why. It's because the situation looks very, very bad for a PR standpoint for the police. I mean, there's no reason that they couldn't have went into that classroom to save the children. In fact, they were supposed to. That has been protocol ever since after Columbine. You go in with what you got. If you respond to the scene, you're going in there. You take out the shooter before they can kill more children. Now, obviously, the Uvalde police did not do that. And so you had the local police and you had all these different departments that were involved. And then you also had Border Patrol, Customs and Border Patrol agents. They're the ones that ultimately stormed into the classroom. And so during that time, of course, you had over an hour where you had police stacked outside the door. 19 police outside the door. One for every dead child, by the way. That were just waiting. And so, again, they have no good answer for why they have waited. These police officers, as I showed you before, they had body armor, level 4 body armor, capable of stopping rifle rounds. The police were very well funded and very well armed. In fact, 40% of the budget actually went to the police department, the Uvalde Police Department. This is not Baltimore. This is not Minneapolis. Nobody even attempted to defund the police, which, by the way, all the attempts to defund the police have been clawed back, and now we're back to basically refunding the police, giving the police even more and more money. Congress giving them more money. Biden promising to give them more money. And so this has never been an issue of police being defunded, right? And in fact, look, in Uvalde, the mayor seemed pretty right-wing to me. Now, if your argument is, and the reason that I bring it up, if your argument is, well, we didn't deep throat the police boot enough, and that's why they didn't go in, because they were demoralized, or they didn't have the money, they didn't have the equipment. Well, you're very, very mistaken about that. Very mistaken. They had the money, they had the equipment, they had the training, they had the backup, they had the numbers. And you know what they didn't have? The balls, apparently, to go into that room and to confront one shooter armed with an AR-15 without even any body armor. Well, they had all the advantages. No. Not an active shooter situation. No, we can contain him. So now, look, this is why, and I know this is not a popular position, at least when it comes to liberals, Democrats, but hear me out, right? I think this is exactly why defund the police is the right position. I will definitely admit that the optics are terrible about it, okay? The slogan, the optics, sure, they sound both terrible. I get it, especially when you have spikes in crime in places like New York, LA, and things like that, places like that, okay? But let me just counter it with the fact that funding, all of the funding of police, all the billions of dollars, for example, pumped into the NYPD and the LAPD, did they do a whole lot to deter crime? No. And certainly, of course, they didn't do a lot to solve that crime. It turns out, and we know this from years, that militarized police, having a militarized police force does not do anything to deter crime. And by the way, on the other side of that argument, neither did having an uber armed populace. Because guess what? Texas has both. Yes, you have incredibly loose gun laws in Texas. And you have very militarized police. Didn't stop crime, didn't stop mass shootings for sure. There were plenty of good guys with guns. 19 of them stacked outside of a door. And they couldn't stop one person before killing 19 children and 2 adults and wounding 17 others. By the way, I don't think enough people talk about that, and I'm guilty of that myself, okay? So those 17 wounded children, well, guess what? They're going to have to deal with some of this for a very, very long time, the rest of their lives. Not only, of course, with the mental trauma, PTSD, but you also have the physical trauma as well. You know, we live in this country where we don't have health care. So, not only are they shot, injured, bullet fragments, and, having to go to the hospital, then their parents have to pay the bill. This is a barbaric system where we now are charging victims medical bills that they're going to have to pay for a very, very long time. And again, that's not even counting how much therapy these children are going to need and the fallout from PTSD. And so those are the survivors. Not to mention, of course, the dead who, again, could have, in many cases, probably could have been saved. I mean, we don't know for sure. But throughout that hour, how many do you think bled out? Because the police didn't do their job. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so, no. Well, look, and by the way, getting back to crime, right? So, look, defund the police because we have to get at the root of crime. Now, oftentimes that comes down to things like addiction, poverty, mental illness, yes, some very taboo subjects, but things that you can actually do stuff about, policy. And so, look, not only that, but you also have to, because we know that the best way to stop crime is to prevent it. The best way to stop mass shootings are to prevent mass shootings, right? Police are only there to react to after the fact, after the people are already dead. Prevention should be the main focus of this discussion. Yeah, we know the police were cowards. They were trained to be cowards. We know that. But understand that also, this never would have happened had Salvador Ramos not been able to get his hands on a high-powered rifle as easily as he had. And I think that gets lost in this conversation as well. It's very important to continue to talk about, hey, maybe we need to find some ways to make sure that people cannot, who by the way, have a history of abuse, as we've seen in some of his online discussions where he had threatened rape, where he had threatened violence against others, to prevent people from being able to get these weapons. And we can also talk about, because as I've said before, the mass shooting problem, the gun violence problem, it's not just only about guns. It is also about the other things that are mentioned. It's also about, things like mental health. It's also about socioeconomic issues like poverty and addiction, et cetera, et cetera. If you're actually going to solve this problem, you're going to have to solve all of those. Not just one thing. And also have a discussion about our culture and change our culture from one that is gun and death obsessed to one that actually celebrates and protects life. We've got a long way to go. Long way to go. Okay. Moving on. In the days following the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead, various news reports had referenced the police and their claims that the shooter, Salvador Ramos, was able to enter the classroom where he killed all the victims through a door that was left propped open. In fact, I'm going to show you a video here, and I've showed you this before. This is Texas DPS Director Stephen McCraw. This was on a Friday press conference where that claim was first made. Take a look.
Suspected of where we knew the shooter entered, Ramos, was propped open by a teacher. 11:28, the suspect vehicle crashes into the ditch, as previously described. The teacher runs to the room 132 to retrieve a phone, and that same teacher walks back to the exit door, and door remains propped open.
All right, so now, turns out, like a lot of the things the police had said initially, that was not true. According to the San Antonio Express News, the teacher, the lawyer of that teacher, says that no, the teacher had actually closed the door shut after being informed that the active shooter was on the loose in the area. In fact, lawyer Don Flannery said the teacher, who remains unidentified, had called 911 to report an accident near the school involving a black truck. That truck later turned out to belong to Ramos. Flannery added that the teacher propped open the door around the time Ramos crashed the truck and that the employee called 911, but said he wants to make clear that the door was not left propped open. Quote, she saw the wreck. She ran back inside to get her phone to report the accident. She came back out while on the phone with 911. The men at the funeral home warned her, saying he's got a gun. She saw him jump the fence, and he had a gun, so she ran back inside. Before running back inside, she kicked the rock from the door. She remembers pulling the door closed while telling 911 that he was shooting. She thought the door would lock because that door is always supposed to be locked. So, security video, by the way, also confirms the teacher had removed the rock and shut the door. And so here we have another situation where the police had lied. Oh no, it was propped right open, allowing Ramos to come right in. Guess that's kind of the teacher's fault, right? And not our fault. No, that door was closed. Fact. That's the fact. And so now look, I was very, very skeptical of the official police report because I know through doing this and numerous stories that I know that police lie. Now, I realize that to some people that might be incredibly shocking. Oh my God, no, are you saying the police lie? Yeah, I'm saying the police lie. We've had good evidence for a very, very long time. Many stories that police not only will lie in court, plant evidence, write false police reports, and they do so because, look, we are, as a culture, as a society, we've been lied to about the police. We've been told that, no, they're the good guys in every situation. And what they say, you need to take as complete gospel. And by the way, the media, as you've seen, the media had repeated this because they also believe that. The media reports, it's almost like when they do press releases for the government as well. A lot of these news agencies, they will just take what the police say, or in some cases, the Defense Department, the government, etc., and write it down uncritically as if it is the unvarnished truth. And that is not always the case. As far as regular people, again, we're told that the police are paragons of virtue, that they're here to protect us, defenders of goodness. And again, that is not the case. Not the case at all. Obviously, we know that they're human beings. They're fallible. And as such, in many ways, more concerned with protecting themselves. You've heard of the thin blue line, of course. Protecting themselves, their jobs, their department's image. They care about more of those things than doing the right thing in a lot of cases. And this is one of those cases, I believe. While everybody is wondering what took so long for the 19 officers stacked outside the door for over an hour, while children were inside making panicked calls to 911, desperately trying to stay alive. These cops decided, no, we don't have answers for why we didn't act. So we're just going to deflect the blame. We're going to distract you. We're going to throw out some squirrels and say, well, you know, the teacher left the door open. As I mentioned during my report yesterday, when I talked about, it was actually a couple of days ago, but when I talked about this before, when they had first made this claim, that they're pretty deliberate at what they put out in these press conferences. They don't just come out and say, you know, random stuff. No, they're very deliberate in their messaging, even if their messaging is wrong. And so that messaging, pointing out how, like, oh, the teacher left the door open, it was propped open, was kind of meant to take away from the officer's lack of a response. And so they're throwing out those squirrels, and that's pretty disastrous. And look, that's just one of the squirrels being thrown out. Another one is, of course, making sure that we don't have the discussion about gun policy as well. We know the police, it's weird because they said that they were too afraid to go into the room. This is according to another officer talking to Wolf Blitzer on CNN. Oh, we could have been shot. We could have been killed. Well, I mean, that person was armed with an AR-15 and he was holed up in a room. Now, if you think that that is such a danger, that you were so concerned, that you're so worried that you let those kids stay in that room and be killed while you're outside because you're too afraid to go in because they had that AR-15, well, then maybe you should be on the side of trying to do an assault weapons ban. You know, why support something like that. Now, are any police or are any police unions going out there and saying we should have an assault weapons ban because we're tired of seeing dead kids and we're also super afraid of going into those buildings, you know, with these active shooters that are armed with such a weapon? No, they don't go out there. They're not on the side of doing anything about gun regulation, about doing an assault weapons ban. In fact, it seems more likely that they're fine with these weapons because it justifies them getting all these fancy new toys, all these, you know, weapons, ballistic armor, stuff that they can look badass and cosplay in. Well, while it might be cosplay or badassery for you, militarized police is not a good thing for our country. Not a good thing for our populace, especially since the police are not actually here to protect you. They're here to protect property and capital against the population. And that's just a fact. All right. Moving on. The Uvalde School Police Chief, Pedro Arredondo, has been under some scrutiny for the delayed police response to last week's mass shooting at Robb Elementary School. And since he's, you know, facing some scrutiny, it's been pretty difficult to locate within the last few days. How weird. Maybe it's because he has to answer why officers treated the shooter as a barricaded subject instead of an active shooter. I mean, again, this was a guy that made the call. Now, that was despite knowing that children inside the classroom were calling 911 and begging for help for over an hour while they sat outside. He'd also have to answer for why the numerous initial statements from the police have turned out to be completely wrong, flat out false, and why the Uvalde Department and the Uvalde Independent School District Police are now refusing to cooperate with the Texas DPS investigation. So there are a lot of questions here. A lot of questions for Mr. Arredondo, And so he doesn't want to answer them. And you're going to see that in this next video where you have a CNN reporter that decides to confront him. Take a look.
We went to the office where we assumed he was going, and sure enough, we were sitting in our car when he drove in, so we quickly ran out and confronted him, essentially, as he was going in through the back door of the school district office, and we asked him about the accusations from the director of the DPS, who says that he was the sole person who made the decision to not have officers breach that door. We also asked him questions about whether or not he's cooperating with the investigation. Take a listen to what he said.
How are y'all? So I want to talk to you about your decision and what the DPS director said.
How's it going?
Good, I'm Pete. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
I
you.
want to talk to you about the decision and what
Department we're good, but just to let y'all know, and I just spoke with it.
I know you did, but
You're not blocking me, are you?
no.
No.
Turn this way.
No, just so you all know. Just so you all know, obviously, we're not going to release anything. We have people in our community being buried, so we're going to be respectful.
I just want your reaction
we're gonna be
the director McGraw saying that you were responsible for the decision to go into that room. How do you explain yourself to the parents?
We're going to be respectful to the family.
I understand that, but you have an opportunity to explain yourself to the parents.
And just so you know, we're gonna do that eventually, obviously.
When?
And whenever this is done, and we let the families quit grieving, then we'll do that, obviously. And just so everybody knows, we've been in contact with DPS every day. Just so you all know.
They say
They
say that you're not cooperating.
I've been on the phone with them every day.
But they say you're not cooperating. So take
Just
2 seconds.
Just so you know, we've been talking to them every day.
What is your reaction?
Y'all have a good day.
What is your reaction, sir?
Again, that reporter, numerous attempts to contact him, had to go to the back door. The back door. It's almost as if he's hiding from the press and doesn't want to actually answer questions. Weird. Now look, again, here's the reporter that confronted him, saying, we've been reaching out to him, waiting for him to respond to this community, looking for him for days. People here are very upset over some of the decision making, but again, he was dodging questions, key questions, claiming that he was cooperating and claiming that he's going to address this at some point. You know, once the families would stop grieving. I mean, we're still burying bodies. Okay, well, maybe if, your officers, maybe if you would have given the order to go in and not waited for over an hour, there would have been less bodies to bury. You ever think about that? Had you actually done your job? Like what you were supposed to? You didn't follow protocol that you're supposed to. Again, if you're in an active shooter situation, you are, and this was made after Columbine. If you're in that situation without backup, you go in anyway. You go in, you engage the shooter. Okay? They didn't even follow their own protocol. And the families and the rest of the country, we would love to know why. We'd love to have some straight answers here. We'd love to know. Love to know. And finally, I want to point out where Arredondo tells the reporter this. We're going to explain to the families eventually, obviously. Whenever this is done, the families quit grieving, then we'll do that, obviously. Families, quit grieving. Just, no. What they're hoping is that everybody forgets about it, that everybody shuts up about it. That's the real reason that they're waiting. We'll get to it eventually once they start grieving. Well, we all know, any parent who has lost a child, they'll tell you one thing, without a doubt, that the grieving never stops. It never ends. I've got my own personal anecdotes. I know some people that have lost their kids. A friend of mine from high school, had passed away. I knew her mother. That grieving didn't end. My wife's stepmom lost one of her kids during a routine surgery. Still grieving. That grief is never going away. My own sister passed away, by the way, several years ago. I don't think my mom's ever going to stop grieving. And so you ask all those mothers, and they're going to tell you the grieving never ends. There will always be a hole in their lives where their children were. And again, it's horrible no matter the situation, but even more so when you're dealing with small children. I mean, these are just little kids. It's horrifying. So when you hear that, and the way he's so incredibly callous about it, and just like, you know, not even addressing that, no hint of emotion at all. That's heartless. He doesn't give a damn about those families. He doesn't give a damn about those grieving parents, about those children that passed away, that were not passed away, that were murdered, shot. How many of those kids could they have saved? How many of those kids? No, you didn't give a damn about them. In fact, look, I think that really he wants this entire thing to go away. You know why? Because he has now been elected to city council. Yeah, he won an election on May 7th. In fact, Mayor Don McLaughlin had promised after the Uvalde shooting to delay his swearing-in ceremony until the victims had been laid to rest. But of course, that didn't happen. They couldn't even wait. They had a private ceremony on Tuesday to swear him in and the other new council members. Couldn't even wait. Just let me get to my new job. Who gives a damn about the kids? I don't care. No, this guy is only concerned about his own political power, his career. Murder of the 19 children? Oh, man, that is just super inconvenient when it comes to the timing, man. Oh, if only that it just waited a week before Ramos went into that school. Then I wouldn't have to deal with all these annoying questions and the reporters. And I wouldn't have actually had to do my job. I mean, man. Oh, terrible timing. And while you're lamenting, this guy's lamenting about the terrible timing about this and having to answer questions from those damn families. Those same families are empty, have been hollowed out by this incredible tragedy. It is just absolutely disgusting. What a gross person. Monstrous indeed. All right. Let's go to more excuses. All right. Fox host Laura Ingraham is reaching back all the way into the 1950s in order to make a case that it's not easy access to guns that have caused the increase in mass shootings over the last few decades, like the one most recently in Uvalde, Texas, although there have been quite a few reported shootings since then, because in the United States, we have a mass shooting nearly every day. So, but she's going to go on to say it doesn't have anything to do with the guns. No. It's actually the pot.
Well, the New York Times had originally reported that Ramos smoked pot. Then, mysteriously, the reference was missing from the online editions. Now, why is that? Respected medical studies for years now have demonstrated that pot use, especially among teens, can trigger psychosis and increase the chance that a young person will develop violent behaviors. Former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson has written extensively on this subject. A 2012 paper in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence examining a federal survey of more than 9,000 adolescents found that marijuana use was associated with a doubling of domestic violence in the U.S. My question tonight is, Why isn't there a national conversation happening right now about this? Why aren't reporters doing more to demand information on the potential drug use, in this case and others, both illicit drugs and prescription drugs? Whenever there is a societal, cultural, familial, and spiritual deficit, bad things are going to rush in to fill it. Guns, gangs, drugs, then there will be harm to others or self-harm. And until we're honest about all of this, young people will continue to be pawns in a political game.
Now, I love how she talks about, oh, until we're honest about this. Well, I mean, you could start. I mean, that'd be great if you could actually start being honest yourself. Now, look, again, there's so much here in this segment that was wrong, just absolutely wrong. I mean, where do I even start? Where do I start? Oh, yeah. Let's start with the fact that marijuana does not cause mass shootings. Marijuana doesn't cause mass shootings. Violent video games or movies do not cause mass shootings. So now, look, let's get into the argument. Where does she get this from? So now, she cites several things in this. And one is a conservative group, obviously. The other is more interesting. Her main source is an anti-vax COVID truther named Alex Berenson. So now, Berenson was a journalist. He actually used to work for the New York Times, then became an author. He had written a book back in 2019 where he claimed that it was marijuana that caused violent episodes of psychosis and therefore was causing mass violence. So his theory, and again, theory, not actually true, that people would smoke pot and then, or whatever, ingest it, what have you, have violent psychosis and then go on to do acts of violence. So now that book, unfortunately, received very favorable coverage on outlets like CNBC, The New Yorker, Mother Jones, The Marshall Project, and of course he ended up writing op-eds about his findings, and again, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Philadelphia Inquirer. So this is a person, now of course, after COVID, because he had come out to criticize vaccines, mainly he is now just on Fox News. But there was a time where his theories, again, theories, and his ideas were put all over mainstream media. So now, again, my problem here is the findings, okay? How he arrived at these findings. So now, for one, he cited a report from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine on a link between marijuana and psychosis. Now, he claimed from reading that report in his book that, well, these organizations, they declared the issue settled. There's an obvious link. And so if you smoke the pots, you're going to get violent. And that's just a fact. In reality, the National Academy's reports was very nuanced, very careful. It actually cautioned that marijuana and marijuana addictions linked to psychosis is multidirectional or maybe multidirectional and very complex. Basically, marijuana may not cause psychosis, that there's something else that may cause both psychosis and pot use, or that causation could go the other way. Basically, we're not exactly sure and we need to study more. That was the conclusion here. Another possibility they cited is psychotic disorders might end up leading to marijuana use as a way, of course, to self-medicate, because here in this country, in America, we don't have health care. We don't have mental health care. So easier to self-medicate, right? In fact, the report noted that in certain societies, the incidences of schizophrenia have remained stable for the past 50 years, despite the introduction of cannabis into those settings. So introducing more cannabis has actually not increased the levels of this specific psychosis. Now, does he mention any of the caveats? Does he mention any of the nuance here? No, not at all. Does he mention any of the positives? No. What he did is cherry pick data only showing the negatives of cannabis use in order to fit his narrative, and then went with it. And unfortunately, a lot of the mainstream media also went with it as well. So now he also overstates any evidence for a link between pot and psychosis and misrepresents other books and studies that had been done on this. Now, again, the reality is far more nuanced. In fact, in a 2018 study published in Nature Neuroscience, it's actually, it suggested that it's more likely that schizophrenia, again, leads to marijuana use, potentially to cope or self-medicate. The National Academies also analyzed studies on how marijuana affects symptoms of psychotic disorders. There was some evidence that a history of marijuana use may actually improve cognitive performance for those with psychotic disorders. However, of course, that same study ultimately concluded that the evidence was merely limited or moderate, meaning, of course, we need more study. We need more evidence. We need more data. We need to do more of this. We need to learn more about these effects. Okay? So now, it's not settled. And we need more research. Now, that said, does marijuana have benefits? Obviously. Cannabis has a lot of benefits. Is it a cure-all? Absolutely not. There is no panacea. There is no magic cure for everything. But it does help. Now, does it also have risks? Yeah, there are also risks. There are risks to anything, right? Should it be illegal? Hell no. Should we regulate it and tax it? Yes. Should we also ensure that big corporations do not have a monopoly on this and be able to push out smaller growers? No, we should make sure that they do not have those monopolies. And so now on Burnson, again, his analysis on pot and psychosis, very incomplete, lots of cherry-picked data, but also uses a lot of anecdotes of people who may have smoked marijuana and then went to do some heinous crime at some other point in their lives. Well, that's not really evidence. Anecdotal evidence is not evidence. Basically, I think he's like the first to pioneer the Nicki Minaj's "my cousin's friend's balls swelled up due to the vaccine" argument. Well, I know somebody, or I saw somebody, or read a story once where somebody who had smoked pot at one time then ended up chopping up his grandma, and therefore we must conclude that it was the marijuana that made him chop up grandma. No, that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Now, again, he's a COVID truther who had argued against the vaccine using very flawed analysis. So that makes him, of course, a perfect fit for Fox News and Laura Ingraham to be cited. And again, because he had been featured on mainstream media, because he had been a New York Times journalist at one point in his life, that lended him an air of credibility. That Fox News, of course, is like, ooh, yeah, let's jump into that. Now, look, no mass shootings mass shootings are not because of the legalization of marijuana or even the existence of it. No, the common thread that underlines every mass shooting in the United States is the easy access to weaponry. That's it. And look, we can look at every other country that has the same issues that we have. We have mentally ill people here. There are mentally ill people all over the world. There are people that have addictions all over the world. There are single-parent households all over the world. It's insane that we're even using, or that they're even using those arguments. There are violent video games and violent movies that are seen or played all over the world, and yet these other countries can go without mass shootings for years, sometimes decades. But in the United States, we have a mass shooting nearly every single day. Why the difference? Why the massive difference? The guns. It's the guns. Again, other countries either have incredibly stringent gun laws, or they have that and a different culture, because gun culture here in the United States is much different, I think, than the rest of the world. I mean, even in other countries that have high rates of gun ownership, they do not treat them as if they are toys. They treat them as they are, deadly weapons. They're not toys. They're not penis enhancement tools. They're not things for you to cosplay soldier. They're weapons capable and created for killing, for death. You want to create your entire persona around something that creates death, there is something wrong with you. Now, thankfully, the vast majority of gun owners don't actually think that way about their weapons. They actually do have respect. And I'll make my own anecdotes, right? And maybe it's not representative, but I think when you look at the polls, look at the vast majority of gun owners that are for reasonable things like background checks, increased background checks, federal, closing the loopholes, all that stuff. They're in favor of it. Massive majority of Americans, but 90% roughly of Americans support common sense gun regulation. So there's a small minority of people who do, have these very extreme views on their guns. And it is not in step with the vast majority of American citizens. Now, you want to talk about something that's also out of step? Congress. Congress way out of step. And that's sort of different because, yes, while it's related to the group, the very small minority of people who are completely obsessed with their weapons and have that culture, again, these politicians obviously pander to those people for votes, but they also pander to the gun lobby, the gun manufacturers, the NRA, places like that give them checks. Lots and lots of checks, lots and lots of money. Mitt Romney, for example, through his career, received over $13 million. In fact, every politician that you hear, mainly Republicans, but again, there's some Democrats as well, like Henry Cuellar, that have received millions of dollars from the gun lobby. And of course, they're out there opposing even the most sensible gun laws. Just the tiniest amount of regulation. We can't even get a background check in this country, while Canada just pretty much froze the sale of all handguns. So think about that. That's the reasons that we can't move forward with this, even though there's massive support. Now, another thing to consider as well, we're the only country in the world, in the modern developed world, that doesn't even have universal health care. And that includes mental health care. Somehow, we lack that in the wealthiest country in the world. Well, again, it goes back to the issue of Congress. It goes back to the issue of money in politics. And so, yes, all of that stuff is related, unfortunately. So, nonetheless, in order to get you to not talk about these issues, especially money in politics, but yes, the guns as well, here's Fox News throwing out the squirrels. Oh, it's the drugs. It's the drugs. It's the mental health. Even though we're not going to actually do anything about mental health. It's the violent video games. It's the pot. All that. Squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. To try to distract you from actually doing anything. To distract you from the real cause. So at the end of the day, these politicians and these media figures can continue to make gobs of cash off their corruption. Ravaging Wolverine says, it's the mental health. Also, you're on your own. Yep. Pretty much. Mental health care for people on public assistance is very poor. It's also very, very difficult to find someone. I've talked about this before. how there is a real big shortage of licensed therapists in this country, licensed professionals. So it's not good. Pretty terrible situation. All right, let's get to the last story. Maybe the best story of the day. I don't know. Joe Rogan appears to be having a little bit of an identity crisis.
Today, the left has gone so fucking far left, so radical, that the right are the ones that are celebrating comedians and celebrating Chappelle.
Yeah,
and they had my back through all the crazy shit that happened with me. It was Fox News that fucking had my back.
Would you ever think that they would be the ones to cape for you, like, 10 years ago?
I'm so liberal.
Yeah,
like I talk about it all the time. Like I say, I am not a conservative. I'm not conservative. But I am pro Second Amendment, and I am a hunter, and I am a cage fighting commentator, and I drink and I smoke cigars, and I like to bow hunt.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in there that's like, hey,
crossover.
Yeah, but it's just being a human. But I'm a compassionate person. Like, I used to be very pro universal basic income. My thought was, wouldn't it be great if you just had enough money so you could eat and you could pay your rent, and then you could pursue what you wanted to? But the reality of human nature came fully into focus when I realized that when some people got all that money from the government, the COVID money, and then they got unemployment, they didn't want to work. I have a friend who has a restaurant. He could not get people to come back to work. You see a lot of people that own businesses that have a hard time finding people work for them. So there's pros to that, right? The pros are people. It's a marketplace that favors the worker, so workers can ask for more money. So you're seeing a lot of places like bars and restaurants and stuff that have to pay more money per hour, which I guess is good as long as the restaurant can stay open.
All right, so I'm not a conservative. I'm a liberal. I'm very liberal. I don't know why Fox News is defending me. I'm very compassionate. Now let me explain how people are very, very lazy and don't actually want to work. Wait, hold on. Aren't you the guy who used to tell people not to work? Weird. So, okay. Now, first off, he talks about, like, yes, I'm a liberal, but I'm also very pro-Second Amendment. Okay, but here's the thing, right? And by the way, I left a part in earlier, the beginning of that video, where he said the left has gone so far left. You realize that the left is very pro-gun, right? Now, I know it's going to blow a lot of people's minds, right? And when I talk about left, see, Joe Rogan gets this wrong. He thinks the blue check liberals on Twitter are the left. They're not representative of the left. No. Those are the people that have #resist and I'm with her still in their Twitter bios. Okay, that's not the left. No, Joe, if you want to actually see some pro-gun people on the left, talk to actual socialists. You're going to find out that many of them are pro-Second Amendment. And some of the figures on the left, on the socialist left, are very, very pro-gun. For example, Karl Marx. I got some quotes here. Karl Marx back in 1850 said that under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary. Another, Eugene V. Debs, said, recollect that in arming yourselves, as you are bound to do unless you are willing to be forced into abject slavery, you are safely within the spirit and letter of the law. So again, very pro-Second Amendment. Malcolm X said the Constitution of the United States of America clearly affirms the right of every American citizen to bear arms. And as Americans, we will not give up a single right guaranteed under the Constitution. I could go on, but seems very, very pro-Second Amendment to me. Now, I'm not saying I 100% share their opinions, but I also say, okay, I do believe in the Second Amendment, sure. But I also believe that nobody really needs an AR-15 with high-capacity mags and bump stocks. Just saying. guess what? You can believe in the Second Amendment and also believe in regulations. And yes, even banning certain types of weapons, we've already done so. We have banned other weapons of war. That's why you don't see people running around with a Browning M50 machine gun. Okay? That's why you don't see people running around with rocket launchers or grenades. I think the AR-15 should qualify as a weapon of war. Now, that said, point is, oh, and by the way, also not a fan of landmines. You don't need a landmine. You don't need a rocket launcher. You don't need a machine gun nest to defend your house in the suburbs, okay? And no nukes, by the way. Don't need a nuke. Now, again, plenty of leftists, and yes, liberals also do things like hunting, fishing. They like sports, MMA, all that stuff. So you're consigning these activities and these interests as a conservative thing. That's not true. Now, you might be saying, but Jeff, don't you understand you're making your point for him because he says he's a liberal? Not necessarily. I think in reality, Joe Rogan is just a schmuck. I don't think he knows what he is, where he aligns politically. And I think, to be fair, like a lot of Americans, they also don't know where they align politically. Look, when I was younger, I used to think I was a fence rider. I used to think that I was a moderate, that I was a centrist, right? I know, crazy, right? But when you drill deep into policies, when you explain policies, and when you start to know where each side is, and when it comes to policy, I realized, oh, I'm pretty left. Because I do believe in universal health care, Medicare for all, single payer. And I do care about the environment. I do all these things. And so these are my positions on that. And generally, I think progressing society is a good thing. So I don't think Joe Rogan knows what the hell he's talking about. I don't think he knows enough about either side, or really he hangs around with too many people, like, for example, Alex Jones, that have all of these preconceptions and spread all of these straw men, essentially, about what the left actually believes. And he doesn't know a damn thing. You know why? It's because he never even talks to the left anymore. There's some of the better conversations on Rogan's show actually had to do when he did bring on a leftist once in a while, or a lefty person. He doesn't do that anymore. You wonder why. Again, being on the left, being a progressive is about progressing society, getting rid of prejudice and hate for minorities. For example, gay and trans people. Yes, getting rid of the hate against trans people, that's progressive. Ooh, what does Joe Rogan keep getting in trouble for? Oh, right, being a transphobe. And he's getting very, very salty about being called out about being a transphobe. What about supporting science? Ooh, that's another thing Joe Rogan's been hit for. The science of vaccines, on vaccination. Yeah. Not in favor of that. Knowledge, education. Being in favor of that. Progressive society, supporting science, progressive society. Making society safer while ensuring basic freedoms. Evolving past capitalism. And the need in our society to work to survive. That's progress. Why should we, as people with finite lives, have to spend the majority of it doing a job we hate to pay the bills? By the way, Joe Rogan used to believe in that very argument. He used to say that argument. Hey, why we've only got so long to live. Why are we doing jobs we hate? Gee, what happened? What happened? We'll get to that. Of course. But look, if you want to paint pictures all day, that's fine. Or make videos, or I don't know, do a podcast where you bullshit with your friends. That's totally fine. You should be able to do that and should still be able to eat. And Joe Rogan's been very, very successful at doing those things. As far as his friends, look, if these companies are having such a difficult time keeping their workers, well, maybe they ought to pay them more. Maybe They're only coming to work because they're forced to do a job that they'd rather not do. I don't want to work. Work sucks. I don't think it's a virtue to work for someone else in order to make them richer. I think you have to do what you have to do, especially if you're getting paid below subsistence wages. You know, I think work, if you're going to do it, should be fulfilling and not just to survive. So, and look, there's this lie, this giant fallacy that I hear all the time, that if people didn't have to, they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't work. They just sit on the couch eating bonbons all day. Now, of course, I think some people would make that choice. Maybe I would. But no, look, not everybody would. No, I think the vast majority of people would then find something to do with their time that is more fulfilling, be it gardening, writing, building things, tinkering, what have you, right? And for example, let's take my wife, right? So she works in the medical field, not because it's a paycheck, but she genuinely loves it. And she says, look, the reason I do it is not just so I can get paid. Yeah, it's kind of nice to be able to pay the bills and survive and all that. But I do it because I want to help people, because I love helping people and assisting them. And the medical field is so incredibly fascinating to me. And there's a lot of people who feel the same way in all these different fields, in every different field. So what we have to do is divorce this idea that work is a virtue. It's not. What it does is that line of thinking forces people into thinking that, hey, look, working a shitty job and wasting the entirety of my life, well, that makes me a good person because at least I'm not lazy. Well, it doesn't. I can tell you from experience that you actually just end up getting angry and resentful, miserable. And so, again, it also breeds the thought of like, hey, if I have to suffer by working a job I hate, then you should too. Then you all have to. And I think that's by design, because the capitalists today want a working class that fights each other instead of banding together to, I don't know, fight for better conditions, less hours, more pay, etc. So, but look, what happened to Joe Rogan? Well, I'm guessing it has to do with money. I also think it has to do with audience capture. I think that's a very, very big thing. And we've seen this happen with many, people, okay, that are, unfortunately, that are in this field, that are doing podcasts, that are doing videos, that are doing, having conversations and shows like this. There is that audience capture, right? Well, right-wingers, unfortunately, make up a pretty sizable chunk, if not most of his audience nowadays. And so now, I mean, you repeat that right-wing rhetoric, you do so and you keep that audience, you keep building that audience, and you keep making the money. So if you're captured by the audience, then you're going to continue to be forced into going even further right, or continuing to affirm right-wing positions. Now, what's interesting about this is, again, I don't really want to classify Joe Rogan as either a liberal or conservative, right? He says he's liberal. And here's the thing that conservatives, the right wing, likes to do. They like to take people who claim to be liberal, right? And say, look at this liberal speaking out against the left. Look at how extreme the left has become. When in reality, I've shown you the graphs where you had the right wing that has gone way to the right, whereas the Democratic Party barely going a little bit to the left. So, but they love to trot those people out. Say, look at how extreme they are. And you have Dave Rubin and Tim Pool that are two big examples of that. Oh no, we're so liberal, even though we agree with pretty much everything the right wing says. No, in reality, those people were never on the left. They're never really liberals. They were never leftists at all. What they did is they saw an opportunity for easy money. The same thing with Candace Owens. I'm pretty sure Tommy Loren also fits into that. And so the right wing loves these so-called liberals, and they make it very, very inviting for them. Because here's the thing about the left, right? We do love to criticize our own, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's part of holding people accountable. Now, sometimes that can go a little overboard, because look, I believe that there is the power of redemption, and nobody really, not a lot of people, I think, arrive at the left 100% pure. Sometimes you go through a transition from being conservative to having your eyes opened and then adopting leftist positions. And that takes time. And so I can understand like some of that criticism being a little unfair if you're still trying to get to that better place. But if you have an open mind and you're willing to learn, you're willing to own up to past mistakes, I think that's totally fine. I think that you should be welcomed, right? But again, there are some people who are a little harsh to those people, right? And create not quite an inviting atmosphere. But understand that on the left here, that's at least, I think, mostly done in good faith. On the right wing, not good faith at all. On the right wing, they see this and they see people that get criticized and go, there's somebody we can bring over to our side. And we're going to offer them lots of money. We're going to defend them against good faith criticism for the most part. Or, hey, if you're being a transphobic douchebag, then, yeah, we're going to defend you. Because on the right, we also hate trans people. So they do that. And again, notice how Fox News defended him against charges of him spreading COVID misinformation, which he absolutely did. And then, of course, on transphobia. When it comes to, for example, Dave Chappelle, who also has been constantly talking about trans people, and attacking that community, punching down, and being criticized by the left for doing so. Now, that's why all these conservatives are now backing these people, because it really breeds some space, creates this space where they can bring over these very popular influencers over to the right wing, and allows them to say, look at how crazy the left has become, actually defending trans people, and calling them out for being transphobic. These influencers, gee, look at how crazy the left is now. They're chasing people out of the left. Good people like, Dave Rubin. I know, right? Good people like Joe Rogan. Good lefties, good liberals. Like Dave Chappelle. I can't believe they're chasing them out. They must be insane. No. This is their playbook. And unfortunately, we have caught on to that playbook a little too late. And it's unfortunately very, very effective at trying to turn public opinion against the left. Okay. So that's it. That's all I got. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. I really appreciate it. Let's read some super chats if we have any. We have, hold on. Hold on. I think I missed a super chat from earlier, so I'm trying to find that. All right, so let's see. Monty Darno, thank you for the very kind $2. Cheers to some of the best people I know. Tyler Heckner says defamation is serious, is a serious issue. Yeah, but when it's, I don't know, between two celebrities, I just find like I don't care. I'm like, sorry. Witchy Dragon with the very kind nearly $2. So that's thank you, appreciate that. Gabby Mathis, thank you for the $5. Really appreciate it. So thank you. Let's go over to Twitch here. Occam Stazer says, "Make us smarter, Jeff. The Republicans are trying to take away our brains." Oh, you know what? I don't make anybody smarter. I'm just trying to give information and my analysis. So, but thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. Smatty Dragon, thank you for gifting the tier 1 community sub. Appreciate that. Vicky Clee, thank you. Appreciate that. €5. No, that's not euros. Sorry, that's pounds. I get my signs all screwed up. But thank you, nonetheless. Really appreciate that. All right. Let's see who we're gonna raid here. Over on Twitch. We'll do a Twitchuation room. Sorry, raid over with Francesca Fiorentini. So, and do that. Thank you all for joining the show. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Love you all, and remember, change begins with you. We'll see you all tomorrow, right here, same time, same place. Love you all. Bye.
Big, massive dump.
No.
Oh, God, I'm sorry.
Disappointed! Obama!
Sexual anarchy.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.